Hi everyone, my name is Hunter Ingram. I am a TV writer and I am thrilled to join you today at PALEYFEST Fall TV Previews as we give you an inside look at Acorn TV's new murder mystery series, Murder Before Evensong, which will premiere on September 29th in the US and Canada on Acorn TV. The 6-episode series stars Matthew Lewis as Canon Daniel Clement, the rector of Champton, and the character at the heart of the best-selling novels by the Reverend Richard Coles set in England in the 1980s. After finding a dead body in his church, the empathetic Daniel is pulled right into the heart of a murder mystery. He is going to have to keep himself and his congregation safe as he goes up against a strict detective and his own overbearing mother, but he's got to make it out alive, and he's got to keep his congregation safe with a killer on the loose. Before we introduce our panelists today, let's take a look at the trailer for this incredibly compelling new series to give you a peek at what's to come this season.
None of this makes sense. To take a life in a church, I pray for the departed, and I pray for whoever did him wrong, that they receive justice and mercy.
A world of secrets, lies and murder under the veneer of middle-class respectability. Just my cup of tea.
I think you might be useful. You know these people better than anyone. You're a way in.
Well, you don't think the killer's here?
That's where we're going to find the killer, Daniel. In your congregation.
So what did you tell them?
I said no comment.
How exciting. I've always wanted to say that.
There is someone who might know what happened. Find them, and we might find out why Anthony was murdered.
Look at you. Make a detective of you yet.
This has all been about the murderer keeping a secret.
There's something you ought to know.
It's a bloody conspiracy. Keep your nose out of other people's business.
What if the murderer made a mistake and the person they really wanted to kill was you?
Take care walking home. Haven't you heard? There's a killer about.
As I said, this is an incredibly compelling new series, and to talk all about it, I have a wonderful panel here today with the people behind the show. We're going to start with executive producer Radford Neville. As Canon Daniel Clement, actor and star Matthew Lewis.
Hello.
As Honor de Flores, Meghan Treadway.
Hello.
And as Detective Sergeant Neil Vanloo, we have Amit Shah.
Hi, everyone.
Well, thank you all for being here. I so appreciate it. And this series, I was very fortunate to see the first couple of episodes. You have a wonderful show here. It is an incredibly fun story. This is based on a book series that people may know by the Reverend Richard Coles, and it's set in England in the 1980s, as people have just seen. And so it's a fun time period. It's a fun story. And of course, because this is Acorn TV, there is murder involved. And so I want to get into the nitty-gritty of this series. But Radford, I want to start with you because this does have it all. It has the atmospheric 80s. It has the murder. It has all of these fun topics to really chew into. And so what brought you to this project, and how did you go about adapting this wonderful book series?
It was a book that we were aware of before it was published, probably nearly a year before it was published. And we were really lucky because we talked to Acorn about it, and they came on board right at the very beginning. So they were there when we optioned the book, and had already committed to us writing the pilot episode. So from that point of view, it was kind of quite a quick start to development. Obviously, we needed a writer, and I execed a series called DCI Banks about 10 years ago. And the main writer on that was someone called Nick Hicks Beach. So when we got the rights to Murder Before Evensong, I contacted Nick because I really wanted him to come on board. He's so brilliant at these murder mysteries. And he said yes, which was great. And then we brought our story producer on board from DCI Banks as well, who's called Anne-Louise Russell. So the three of us formed quite a nice core team who had worked together a lot before and trusted each other creatively. And so, you know, from that point of view, from that moment on, the truth is it was lots and lots and lots of Zoom calls. While we tried to figure out, you know, what the shape of the series was going to be, how many episodes it was going to be, what the episodic hooks would be. In the book, there are a lot more characters than we need in the TV series. So we had to decide, which characters to keep and which ones not to keep. But it was a really nice process. Acorn were really supportive creatively throughout, and Channel 5 as well when they came on board towards the end. So as always, it was a long process, but it was a good process.
So fans of the book series will be able to come into this and see something they recognize, but it has been formed into a series. So, new evolution of these characters and a little bit of change to some of these stories, it seems, but to a fun result.
I hope so. I mean, we've been pretty faithful to the book. Richard was fantastic when he, at the very beginning, he said he completely understood that a TV series is a different thing to a book. And so he knew that there would be changes. And so what we really tried to do was always be inspired by what was in the book. But, the reality is that TV shows kind of eat up plot. And so we kind of had to sort of deepen the mystery and the characters' motivations in order to have enough twists and turns to take us through a whole 6 episodes.
Yeah. So a nice companion to Richard's books, it seems.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's all the same regular characters, it's the same locations, we're following the same mystery. We've just invented some additional treats, I think, along the way to make a really nice 6-part series.
Absolutely. And at the center of this, of course, is Matthew as Canon Daniel Clement. Matthew, what about this character interests you? Because it's not every day that you're going to throw on the robe of a pastor and solve a murder mystery.
Definitely not for me, anyway. It was something obviously very different. I mean, everyone says that, don't they? But it was something genuinely very, very different from anything I've done before. Both in terms of the story and the character. I've been a fan of Richard's for a long time, which it's kind of an unusual character in terms of obviously being a pop star back in the 80s, a very big pop star, and certainly in the UK and Europe, and then to obviously transitioned into clergyman, Church of England clergyman, and he kind of became this the famous priest. I mean, it's hard to describe like how that transition came, but he's very, very funny. He's very acerbic and witty, and I guess he just fit naturally as a broadcaster, really. And he did the bit of that in between being a pop star and a vicar. So as he became a vicar, I think he assumed he just carried on with that. And so I was aware of him from various things in the UK, whether it's, Have I Got News for You or Radio 4 or whatever. And I just found him fascinating as someone who's not a religious person in my own life. I just found him and his whole approach to, well, not just to his religion, but to life in general, just really, really interesting. He's a fascinating man. And so I was very aware of of him and his output, but I confess I hadn't read the book. I didn't even know he'd written a series of murder mysteries. And so when this came up and I saw Richard Cole's name, I was thrilled, and I sort of dived straight into the script. And Daniel isn't Richard, as Richard's very, very keen to point out. There's a few more similarities perhaps than Richard would admit, but they are different people. But still, just to be involved in something that had his fingerprints on was something that I was very, very interested in. And then the adaptation that Nick's done it's really special. It's funny, Rad was just talking about DCI Banks. I haven't seen DCI Banks, but I remember many years ago I was in a show up in Yorkshire, and we were at the RTS Awards, just some awards in the UK, and we were up for many things, and DCI Banks won all of them, and much to our creative team's chagrin. So I'm very, very aware of how good Nick is, and it really comes through in the script. I hope he doesn't mind me saying. He said to me, I don't know how many chances of this. I don't know how many series we'll get to do. So I've just put everything in this, and he really has. I mean, it's got so much in it, and you couldn't read the script and not be like, yeah, I want to be a part of this.
It really shows. I mean, just in the first couple of episodes, and the fact that now you and Radford have joined forces. I mean, that's a formidable team. I think that bodes well for this series. Well, I want to talk a little bit about this world that Daniel lives in, but first I want to ask about our other characters that kind of move in and out of his story. Meghan, of course, you are playing Honor de Flores. Her family has its own legacy that kind of exists around and within this church. And so can you talk a little bit about your role and how you came to this particular project?
I can, yeah. So Honor is the eldest daughter in the de Flores family, with Bernard at the top, Lord de Flores, and they are the landowners in Champton. So they own Champton House, and it's the 80s. So there is very much a class system still in place in this little village, and everyone knows who they are and what they do. And Honor is this very sort of commercially minded Londoneaster who's come up to London to help the family maintain their business, help the family improve their business, and improve their reputation around everyone as well. So she is this really cool businesswoman who's also got a lot of empathy and love. She's very close to her father, she's very close to her younger brother, and she's really close to Daniel as well. So you see this lovely platonic intellectual chemistry play out between them, which I think is really gorgeous. So yeah, she's sort of come in to help and be around.
Well, and obviously Honor is part of that support system in many ways that kind of orbits Daniel, which is so characteristic of an Acorn show, at least for those of us who are experiencing a lot of these projects on the streamer. And another part of that is obviously our protagonist always has a nice partner in crime, and really Daniel has too, with Honor and of course with our detective here. So Amit, how did you come to this role, and how did you prepare to play a DS, a detective?
Well, I was simply called in to meet the cast. Have I said something very funny?
You make me laugh, Amit. That's all.
Oh no. Okay. I apologize. Anyway, as I was saying, I was called in to meet the casting director and David, our wonderful director, and we read a few scenes, and I hadn't really seen the full script. Embarrassingly, I hadn't even read the novels. But the thing about Richard Coles is that he's a bit of a national treasure in the UK. As Matthew mentioned, he's had many careers. He was a musician and then became a vicar, and most recently became a novelist. And he's been very successful in all of these careers. So I very much knew who Richard was and was very intrigued to come in and read these scenes. And it's very exciting because, you know, whenever you deal with an adaptation, you have to have this respect that it's its own creation in a sense. And Richard was very supportive of that. And as Rad said, he very much respected that the medium of writing a book and a television show are very different, and those stories can be told in different ways. So, yeah, in a long way, that's how I became involved. I was just called in to meet the director and was very intrigued to be involved.
Well, you wear a detective well. What was it like to kind of step into that role?
Well, the moustache was key, I would say. The costume. Actually, the moustache, I became slightly attached to the moustache. I'd never grown a moustache before. And I thought, oh, it looks a bit creepy, but it really did suit this character. You know, when you added it to the costume and, you know, the world he lived in. And I guess with a detective, the important thing for me to remember is that they're good listeners and they're very observant. And I think that's possibly why he had this very interesting connection to Daniel, because, again, vicars and priests, they have to be good listeners and they are very observant and they know what's going on. They have this I don't know, this extra sense. So I think that's where the connection comes between these two characters who become this team, I guess.
Can I just jump in on the facial hair there? Because it's quite amazing that on the first day that Matt was due to film, I swear at breakfast you had a beard. And then we decided to shave it off before we filmed the first scene. And then on the very first day Amit was filming, he had a moustache. And it was like, shall we keep it? Shan't we? And in the end, we decided to. And you kind of know from that moment you're committed to the whole series.
Yeah.
Definitely right decision.
I should say that Matt looks completely unrecognizable compared to how he looked when we were filming. This is a completely different person, I feel like.
No, I barely recognize you.
Because he's a father now.
Yeah, it's because I have the big bags under my eyes. I think that's what it is. Yeah, the beard was it? I mean, I guess what was it to try and make me look a little bit older? Do you think was that the idea, Rad? I definitely.
I think if we're honest, that's where the idea came from. But
yeah, Daniel is not a beardman. He's definitely clean shaven. So I'm glad that we went with that. But it's important though, isn't it? I mean, like it's funny, but like. All that little stuff, it sounds so silly, but facial hair and costume and all these things, particularly with a period piece as well. I mean, it's really important to really try and get these things right, not just for the era, but for your own character in that world. And it's a thing that I feel like everyone involved in this, right down to the minutiae of their characters was really interested in all that kind of stuff and getting it right. And obviously we had the roadmap of the novel to work with, which is always invaluable whenever if you've got some original source material, it is really, really helpful.
So what I'm hearing is, whether it's rector or detective, it all starts with a beard and you go from there. That's
pretty much.
Starting point.
But for honor too, actually. That's what started, yeah.
Well, Radford, let's talk a little bit about Champton. Obviously, you can't just go to any town in the English countryside and tell a story with one that has that community as such a foundation of this particular one. And so can you talk a little bit about where you filmed the show and did it all start with a church and build around it looking for that first, or did you go for the town aesthetic when you were trying to find your Champton?
It was a bit of an adventure, to be honest, because Richard doesn't actually state in the novels where in England the novels are set. And so we felt we had pretty much free rein to go and look all over England. So we actually recce'd in the northeast of England, near Newcastle. We recce'd what felt like all of Yorkshire. And then we recce'd the West Midlands as well, which is in and around Birmingham. And in the end, we chose the West Midlands because we'd found some really nice architecture, some really nice locations. And actually, the architecture of the villages in the West Midlands is there's quite a mixture of styles. So there's some thatch cottages, there are red brick cottages, there are also black and white Tudor houses. And that felt more truthful to the village that Richard described in the books. And so that's what made the decision for us in the end. And then, of course, you then set off to try and find the perfect village to be Champton. But as always, it's never quite as simple as that, especially when you're making a period show. So, a village might have one beautiful street here, which works perfectly. But if you turn around, you might be looking at a very modern building, which you can't look at. So we ended up using 3 different villages to make up our one village, 2 of which were in the county of Shropshire, and one was like 2 hours away in Warwickshire. I'd probably say that the main village was a little place called Warfield, and that's because that is where the church is. And I mean, David Moore and myself, David Moore is the director. Honestly, I think we probably recce'd about 300 or 400 churches before we decided on that church. And the reason we loved that church was a lot to do with the setting in the village. It sits really beautifully at the end of the main street in the village. It's got a really lovely graveyard and surroundings. And then inside the church, sort of 95% of it is incredibly old and very beautiful. It was built in about 1100, so it's nearly 1,000 years old, the church. But unfortunately for us, at the back of the church about 10 years ago, they'd done a little modern renovation where they'd put a little cafe in. So our design team had to build an entirely sort of wooden wall to go at the back of the church so that we could hide the modern bit that had been added. So yeah, the church was a key location. And then we found there's a town called Bridgenorth, which is a beautiful market town, which we used as Braunstonbury, which is where the police station is, for example. And then we also needed to find a home for the DeFlores. We had to find Champton House. And again, we looked at a lot of country houses. But I would say country houses in the UK, often they become tourist attractions. And, no one lives there anymore. They're run by the National Trust. And we found a house called Chillington Hall, which is in Staffordshire. And what's amazing is it's been owned by the same family for centuries. The couple who live there are in their late 30s, they've got a couple of young children. And so it feels like a family home. And they were really welcoming. And so that was really important to us, to find a country house that felt like a home. And then finally, I suppose it's worth mentioning the rectory, which obviously we have a lot of scenes there with Daniel and his mum. And we found this brilliant building to be the rectory, which is a real period, not been touched at all over the years, had a fabulous 70s kitchen, which we were very happy to use. And the only issue with it, again, as there's always an issue, the house itself sits in very open countryside, whereas our rectory in the story is supposed to be in the village down a little drive. So the driveway to the rectory is actually a 2-hour drive away from the rectory itself that we used. So whenever we filmed in the rectory, we had to CGI the rectory. Whenever we filmed on the rectory drive, we had to CGI the rectory off of the drive. So I think you're going to show a clip from episode 1, and in that very clip, we're looking down the driveway towards the house, and the house isn't really there.
You set me up perfectly. You were reading my mind, because I thought it would be a great time to throw to a clip from the first episode that, shows another part of Daniel's life. We've talked about Honor, we've talked about Neil, but there's someone else who holds quite a space in Daniel's life.
Exactly.
I don't want to help, just want to get past. So how about moving?
Which is precisely what we would do if only you'd back up.
Listen, missus, you're in a car, I've got a tractor. You're the one that needs to move.
Then we have a problem, don't we? Turn the ignition off. Turn it off! I can wait all night. Can you? Mrs.
Right, now you're starting to annoy me.
I'd do what she says, Nathan. You won't win, and she fights dirty.
Yeah? A friend of yours, is she, Reverend?
She's my mother.
Well, the person that you've seen in this scene, it's the big debut of Audrey, Daniel's mother, played by Amanda Redman. And this is a defining part of this show, this banter back and forth, this relationship that's definitely full of love, but so many other things that you'll see over the course of the series. Matthew, can you talk a little bit about working with Amanda to build the relationship between Daniel and Audrey?
Yeah, Amanda was amazing. I couldn't have hoped for anyone better to have been playing. Not just to play my mother, but specifically that character of Audrey. I think that Amanda has been doing this a long time, and she understands, like, in her DNA, like, the tone and how to play things, and the character could easily become almost a bit slapstick at times. There's some of the humor could perhaps be over-egged a little bit, but she just, I don't know if she has to work hard at doing it. It feels so effortless. I really don't know. Maybe she spends days and weeks and months doing this, but it feels effortless. She just inherently knows how to do it, and she plays everything very straight. And by doing that, it makes it so much funnier. And we saw in that scene there, and yeah, it was I mean, actually, some of it was quite tough with Amanda because she is so funny and doesn't a bit like Amit actually, is so funny without realizing they're being funny. That makes it quite difficult for me sometimes. But also like in some of the heavier moments of which we are going to develop throughout the series, their relationship is strained to say the least. There is an awful lot of things that are unsaid, have been unsaid for a long time, but have been bubbling beneath the surface and will naturally boil over now that they are living together. That kind of pitching that journey was very interesting because we didn't want to go too fast too early. It has to come to a crescendo towards later in the series, but there is little chirps and nibbles all throughout, and enough that you want to give the audience something to go, okay, well, there's more to that story. There's something here, but also not enough that it ever spills over until we really need it to. And Amanda was just, again, she just gets it. The roadmap of the series, she just understands it, and it was so brilliant to sit and discuss scenes with her and workshop scenes with her and really try and plot our way through before we ever got on set. And then obviously we'd have David, who would then add his input as well. But before we even got on there, when we're in the green room or in our spare time, we would sit and we would try and plot this journey together. And we got on exceptionally well, which is lucky. And it's interesting because Amanda shared, I think that Audrey in her own way is quite similar to both of our mothers in different ways, in which, because Richard will always, there's a lot of his own mother in this, but he adored his mother, loved his mom, just as I love mine and Amanda loved hers. But at the same time, there can be a bit of headbutting. I think it usually comes from when people are so similar, actually. And Daniel and Audrey have similarities that I think neither of them want to admit. Certainly not Daniel, and I think that's where some of their headbutting comes. But then there's a lot of stuff that happened in the past with their father and whatnot. But yeah, just having the opportunity to go through those kind of personal experiences and with Amanda and unpick those and add some of those and giving a little bit more color to it was just such a pleasure. She's amazing, really, really superb.
Yeah, just as a tease for our audience, there's a hilarious scene in the second episode where something happens involving Daniel, and there's a fear that he's been antagonized, and she says, "Nobody's mean to my son, only me." And that's a
it kind of sums up the relationship right there. Yeah, exactly.
And so it's definitely a fun part to look forward to of the show. Well, to wrap it up, I want to give the three of you on screen a chance to kind of give us a peek in trying to wrap your head around playing a character in the 80s. Because, especially if you're investigating a murder, we have not had as many procedural TV shows in the 80s as we have now to teach everyone in the real world how to solve a murder. And so how did you all go about finding the right tone and tenor to be members of a decade gone by? Meghan, you want to start?
Yeah. I'll go for it. Well, the books were so helpful to me in finding Honor's backstory, and there's a lot about her life in London and how she meets Daniel and brings him to Champton as well that really helped flesh that out. So I started there with just looking at London in the 80s, but then Charlie Poole, our costume designer, has done such a cracking job of finding everyone's silhouette. So for me, playing this kind of upper class, cool person, it was so great to just bash out some frocks. Like I have got some great costumes in this series, and so much of, we were talking about the hair and the makeup earlier, and so much of that does such a strong job for you in terms of the way that you carry yourself. I've got this amazing tailored riding jacket that just completely helped my posture and the way I stood and the way I aligned my voice. So that was a really helpful way into the 80s for me. I happen to think I have the best costumes in the series, and I just made sure that everyone knew I felt that way as well, because it helped me get into that energy so much. So I think the Cozies did a really good job there for us.
Yeah, I can confirm you have incredible costumes, though we won't take anything away from Daniel's rector robes.
There's not a huge amount of variation in my costumes, but what they do get is very special.
The duffel coat is very, very chic.
You're right, actually. Yes. I'm a big fan of the green duffel.
Amit, did anything help you get in the mindset of an 80s detective?
Well, I love the 80s in every way. I love the music. I love the fashion, and what this show does so well is that I want to say effortlessly, but there's been a lot of work into creating this world and allowing the audience to simply step into this period. As a detective, I guess the main difference was that the technology that detectives and the police in general have today wasn't around in the 80s. So for this character, what he had to do was, in a very clever way, use what's at his disposal. And that happens to be Daniel. And using Daniel as a reference point and someone who can inform him about this community, who's very much sits at the center of this group of people, and that's a very kind of clever technique, I think, that he uses, that he can only use at that period in time. So the 80s. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s. I wish I could go back.
I will say as well, Rad's obviously really touched on it, but the recce and what the art department did to really create these environments for us to walk into and play amongst. It's really a special job that they've done. Some of particularly the rectory, I think, but all of these places, sounds a bit pretentious, but these locations, Chillington Hall, the church, there as much characters in this story as we are. I mean, particularly the church, actually, as the series goes on, you'll see it's going to play such a huge role in the series, and the way that they've dressed these locations and transported us as performers to the 80s. I mean, it's really going to take audiences there as well. And my rectory was, I don't even know where they get this stuff from. I mean, there was times when Esther in the art department, she would have to run out and she'd say, I've passed a charity shop on the way here and they had this wonderful 80s thing. I'm going to go run out and grab it. And she'd just, on a lunch break, she'd run out and buy this thing that she saw. And they did this throughout the entire series to really build up a wonderful collage of just pure 80s. And it helped for us. So I think audiences will absolutely just be transported back there, I hope.
And I want to add to that, from the episodes that I've watched, the music has elevated it to such a level as well. It's like there are some absolute classics in there, and it's so evocative of that time that it really it gave me shivers.
That's what I was going to talk about. Credit to the music supervisor or whoever is in charge of choosing these tracks, because I'm sure some of these songs were quite expensive to get in terms of license. But they're so important in terms of this story and how this story is told.
Well, to finish up, Matthew, you lead this incredible cast. But unfortunately, you're not the real star of this show. I think that is going to go to Cosmo and Hilda, the two dogs that are in Daniel's life. To close this out, would you like to tease our audience with working with the true star of Murder Before Evensong? Were you a bit starstruck?
Yeah, and I really was. It was a real pleasure to work with two absolute titans of television. And what was special about it is that this is actually their first production. They actually had only been working dogs for 12 days by the time we got them on set, but you could just feel it. You could just tell they were going places. But famously, dachshunds they're untrainable, and we have two of them, and they had to be red. Quite specific on that, and so the trainers were like, well, there isn't any working red dachshunds in the country that do this thing, so they went and found two who are actually not related. They're from separate families, and they got them together and they trained them somehow, famously untrainable dogs, and trained them in 12 days, and it was interesting, but they got better and better, and every day on set I was always saying, when are we getting the dogs in, when are the dogs coming in, because they were just so much fun I'm not sure if Rad agrees, because it was a lot of work.
Every day, each of those 12 days I was sent a video of how the training was going by the trainers, so I was sort of seeing their progress during that time. But they did get very starry in the end. They'd only be on set if they were in shot, so Matt had to act, so like a tennis ball or camera. But
Bailey and Penny were their real names, and they are both angels. Except at one time when we were shooting up around the church in the graveyard, and I don't know how I can really describe this, but they'd run off somewhere in the middle of a take, and we had to go and I had to go find them. I was like, guys, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I picked them both up. And I got them there, and Bailey gave me the big old kiss right up the face, only to discover that where he'd run off to was to go and eat some fox excrement, which was now in all of here. Yes. So that was an interesting experience. But everyone's a critic, aren't they? There we go.
Just
what a showbiz note to end on.
Yes.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you all so much for coming and talking about Murder Before Evensong. I can't wait for everybody to see the show. It's incredible. I've only been able to see a little bit, so I know there's so much more to come. It will premiere Monday, September 29th on Acorn in the US and in Canada, with subsequent episodes following the next Mondays. On behalf of the Paley Center, thank you for joining us for this special PALEYFEST Fall TV Previews conversation with the cast and team behind Acorn TV's Murder Before Evensong. You can enjoy more from these programs by clicking the subscribe button below. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.